What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Banishers Ghosts of New Eden one last time in 2024, and I want to talk about what an underappreciated game this is. You know, this is a time to look back and reflect on the year, which I think was kind of underratedly good. It maybe was nothing special compared to some of the bigger years we've ever gotten. There were some big hitters this year, and you're going to walk away from this year thinking about the Final Fantasies, the Astrobots, even the Black Myth, Stellar Blade, etc., right? There's one game, though, and I thought, let's make one last video. You know, I did a review when this game came out. They gave me a code for it a few weeks before the game came out. I was able to play it and see the, I think, unbelievable potential of the franchise that's never going to get to be, right? I mean, long story short, Banishers Ghosts of New Eden comes out, and it just performs horribly. Not in critics. You know, I think anybody that's played this game, and in fact, there's a couple, you know, diehard kind of community members, you know, of podcasts now that have been here for a while. You ever talk to people that play this game, and they're going to tell you what an incredible game it is. I honestly have absolutely no doubt. It's one of those games. It's either you play it and you kind of absolutely love it, or you've never heard of the thing before. And, you know, I don't necessarily blame those people either. This is a game that they tried, I feel, with marketing, but just, you know, we know from financials, we know from what Don't Nod has said publicly, like this game did horrendously bad, you know, in terms of actual performance, in terms of people buying this game. It did nowhere near what it needed to. And I think this is an insanely good writing team. You know, I want to talk about some of the elements that makes Banishers so good. I hope those people are still there, right? Like, while Banishers is not going forward, I think it's the most talented group. And I know we're about to get Lost Records, Bloom, and Rage from a lot of the minds of Life is Strange 1 and 2. Very talented people, but I think the people that worked on Banishers, I really hope they're still at Don't Nod. And if they're not, I think they're going to enhance any studio that gets them because they're phenomenal. And I just didn't want to let 2024 end without doing one more kind of goodbye, you know, to this game. Well, really, the entire game is special. I would say if you're talking about the only thing that I think probably isn't so special, you know, the combat is definitely, you know, a bit of a knockoff God of War. I don't think it's bad whatsoever. I think they do some pretty clever things with swapping between Red and Antea and kind of, you know, having their specialities. The enemy types, I think, are there enough. Bosses, I think, are actually very, very clever and are very good. The combat is not bad by any means. You know, I'm not walking away from the game saying, oh yeah, I hated that. No, it's serviceable. The combat is what it needed to be to, I think, allow the rest of the game to, you know, the combat walks so the rest of the game could run. And you might be surprised, right? Because you think Don't Nod and you think probably more linear games. And this game can be linear at times, and maybe you could actually argue like the whole game in a sense is linear. The game is gigantic. And if you strive to do everything, if you strive to do all of the challenges in this game, if you strive to complete all the side quests, this is a 20, 25, 30-hour game. It is gigantic for Don't Nod standards, right? And again, that's something I think you just got to know kind of going into this game. But it's a beautiful game. I think it's one of the more atmospheric. You know, I talk about best settings in my game awards, and you think about, well, what game can really put you into that environment, put you into that time? And I really think right from the jump, Banishers, and that's kind of what I knew, like when it's rainy and when it's dark and when it's kind of establishing this world of ghost hunters, basically, right? These people that are going after it, and you know, they have their moral codes and all that. It is unreal how quickly you fall for this this setting, you fall for the time period, and you fall for everything that's going on. So I think they absolutely freaking nailed that. The visuals are definitely good. I don't, you know, there's games that probably have looked better in 2024, but the visuals, I think, absolutely does the job. The biggest thing, and the thing, you know, I mentioned in the beginning, but the thing you really got to triple down on is the writing. The characters in this game are phenomenal. The story in this game is phenomenal. You know, we always have the culture warrior stuff, and I try to give respect as much as I can, you know, to as many people out there as I can. But, you know, if you want a story that's just actually spectacular and is not, if you think that games are forcing things, it doesn't force things. If you think that games need representation, it's got representation. No matter where you side on any of this stuff, it's just a good written story. Antea is fantastic. You believe her. You understand where she's coming from. Red is fantastic. And I said this when I first reviewed the game. In terms of a couple, right? I mean, we have had relationships, and, you know, it depends on how believable you think they are. And that's really where a lot of relationships with characters can sink or swim in games, is how believable are they. I don't know, like Nate and Elena, maybe in Uncharted, like they are just so good together and the chemistry is there. And look, there's definitely amazing casts like Final Fantasy VII, right? Their cast just blends and they're all so lovable and they become a family. Persona has a lot of this stuff. Metaphor has a lot of this stuff. But when I think about a well-written husband and wife, just two people that absolutely freaking love each other, but they'll have their differences, but they're in it to the end with each other. I don't think it's ever been done better. Again, I just gave off a couple examples. Think about like Lee and Clementine. Think about those all-time amazing, whether it's duos, right? Oftentimes it does become like an Ellie and Joel, Clementine and Lee, like, they'll pair them up. But there's casts like Persona, Metaphor, Final Fantasy. I think the overall cast in this game is spectacular. I think it's got a great villain and it's got a great world. Again, when it comes to the writing, one thing that doesn't let you down is it's not just writing with Red and Antea, it's writing across the freaking board. The whole game is well written, and that's what really surprised me, because Don't Nod Games, I think, ever since Life is Strange 1, have struggled with consistency. There's always good things in their games, but they never quite hit it. You'll have a game like Tell Me Why or Twin Mirror, and there'll be something interesting about it, but they can't put the whole thing together. And in my opinion, they haven't been able to do it since Life is Strange. This game does it. This game 1,000% does it, where, like I said, the weakest element of this game is probably the combat, and it's not bad by any means. It's just, it's there, it's serviceable. But the writing is another thing, right? It's not only is it hard to do good writing, but it's hard to make it consistent. It's hard to make a game that does have 30 hours of things to do, not just the main missions, which are incredibly well written and tell this arc of a story, tell this relationship between Red and Antea. But what about the side missions? There are a lot of side missions that, they do repeat in terms of, not necessarily, I would say themes in terms of mechanics, right? There's like investigation parts to it. There's talking parts. There's exploration. There's, finding kind of the main thing at the end of it, right? Whether it's finding an item or whatever, you get to choose what to do with ghosts, so on, so on. There's repeatable themes in that way, but how well written a lot of these characters are and how not black and white they are, right? A lot of this game comes down to choice. In fact, it's the main choice with Red and Antea. I will not spoil this game, right? Because I really hope, hopefully, a couple people, see this video and say, yeah, I'll check the game out. There's a main decision that goes throughout the entire game that I think is phenomenally done, okay? And it was one of the more emotional moments, I would say, in gaming in 2024, okay? It's not my favorite game of 2024, but the moment at the end, the major choice that it's the whole game is kind of building to is phenomenal. It is so well done, but even these side things, when you're making decisions of what to do with these characters, they're well written too, and you can see both sides. It's not a game, sometimes like a reality television show, you root for one of them is clearly painted evil, and one of them is clearly painted good, and there is no in between. This game is so well written that you could really go either way with so many of these characters, and I think it does it so well. And those are the strengths, and those are what I don't want to be forgotten, about this game, and that's why I think this game is so important. It's because I just think the writing specifically the writing is so freaking good. The characters are so good. Red and Antea are so spectacular. You got to take my word for this one, guys, okay? I think I know what I'm talking about when I give general opinions on video games. This is a game that's worth checking out, and the biggest issue is just it came out and nobody seemed to care. And again, I can understand that it came out in a busy time, in the beginning of this past year, and comes from a developer that makes smaller things. You're used to Remember Me and Life is Strange, and while Life is Strange blew up, it's the only thing that blew up. Specifically for Don't Nod, or really ever since, these kind of games, they just don't explode. And Banishers is more of that kind of AAA. It's like that AAA made by a AA type thing. That's what it is. And I think they did such an amazing job. So yeah, I just didn't want to again let this year go by without giving this game one last hurrah. It was barely freaking represented at the Game Awards, which I thought was a freaking travesty, and specifically like nominating Red and Antea, the actors that play them, or the story, some sort of writing kind of category. Banishers, I think, should have at least been nominated. It was just completely forgotten about, including by these journalists that pretend they for the most part they know what they're talking about. I don't know. For me, the game is spectacular. It's one of my favorite games of the year, and it's gonna be a game truly. When I think back at this generation, I'll remember the Alan Wakes of last year and things like Final Fantasy of this year, but I'm also gonna think of Banishers. It's a game that's always gonna stick with me, and it sucks because it's done. There's absolutely no way we're getting more of them, and hopefully it can find in life somewhere. Hopefully it can be on PS Plus or Game Pass or something, but it's always going to be a game that I root for. It's always going to be a game that I kind of champion, and I'll help it out in any ways that I can, but obviously, my reach is pretty limited here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.